see we've got the break food coming out, so we'll take a break here in a second. It looks like we're ready to go. Before we do that, Paxton?
Quick question. I've never been on a sales call, so this might be a simple question. I mean, just give an example of how you're going to ask who the decision makers are, and if you're at an appointment and it's just one person that you're engaged with, how you can properly ask who else might be involved.
Here's a quick example, right? Quick example is this. Hey, can I ask you a quick question? If you decide to go forward with something today and you make that decision, is there anyone who might be a little bit upset with you that you didn't talk to them first? Make sense? Not who has the power to say yes, that's what we're so used to hearing. But hey, if you pull the trigger on this, is there anyone who's going to say, why didn't you ask me first? Or why didn't you at least run it by me? Or is there anyone who'd be upset, even if they've got no business being in here, be a little bit upset that you didn't bring it to them? I've got someone like that. I make any decision, they're like, why didn't you bring it to me? And I say, you had nothing to do with it. They still get upset. Do you have one of those people? They can still influence a no. So that's one way to ask who else is involved in the decision that they might not usually think of. Go ahead.
What if there's two people, multiple people involved, and you only have contact with one seller?
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that real quick, because that's a common issue, right? Multiple decision makers, but you're only in front of one, and you may try to get access to one or two others, but you just don't get it. That's real life. That's reality, right?
Probate cases are a lot like that.
Probate cases are a lot like that.
You've got them on the phone, and there's 4 other people.
Very simple answer. What we do is we question through the prospect, so whoever's in front of you. So you say, hey, Jeremy, let me ask you this. After we talk and everything today, and you bring this to your brother, everything we talked about, the offer and how we plan on structuring it, what's he going to say? He's going to say it's crap. Why? What's he hoping to get out of this? Well, he doesn't want to sell unless you just question right through him. What do you think he's going to say? How do you think he'd feel about this? Have you brought this up before? And you can at least get a glimpse into what that is. Does that make sense, everyone?
Absolutely.
Just get a glimpse of what that is.
How often are you guys actually requesting a conference call with the other decision makers? I mean, do you really want that person to sell your strategy to those other decision makers? Or do
You don't. No, you want to try to get in front of them. Okay. There's another strategy we use to try to do that. And if that one fails, we usually question through. So let's break those down real quick since we're talking about it. So best strategy is this. You can't get a hold of, or there's multiple decision makers, you're talking to one. You change your sale. The sale does not become, the outcome does not become, you sign a contract with me. What the sale becomes is, we'll chat, and if you're on board, you like everything you hear, our next step is going to be to talk to Joe. But only if you agree you like everything that you hear. That's your advance agreement. Yes or no, and no is okay. Okay? You switch it up, not sign the contract, because you know they're not going to do it. So it's, hey, let's break this down. I'll view the house. We'll talk about everything you want to get out of it. What you're hoping to see done. I'll give you kind of some ballparks on prices. And if we get to that point and you go, you know what, so far, it's thumbs up, I'm on board, then our next step would be to bring Joel into the conversation. But I don't want to do that unless you sign off on it. Can we agree that if we get to that point and you go, yes, it makes sense, that we take that next step? That's your sale. You're not pushing for the contract anymore. You're pushing to bring in another decision maker. Jared.
Do you ask this, I guess, who else would be involved? How you say, the money piece is usually easiest. Who else is involved in this decision? Are you asking that pre-call to kind of pre-qualify the situation before you go on that appointment?
Yeah, I don't personally. That's always a company-by-company decision. Now, it depends on, my lead flow is minimal, right? Now, if your company, if you've got tons of leads coming in and you need to cherry pick, right, because you're wasting too much time, you're going to just start asking more qualifying questions on the front end. So if you find you're not in front of the decision makers based on, maybe it is probate or whatever your business model is, then yeah, you're going to ask those qualifying questions up front. But usually you're just going to let experience guide you. Hey, we run into this problem over and over again. We need to start asking those qualifying questions up front. Me personally, I get into that stuff when I'm there. Really all I'm looking for is there enough equity in the house that I can get in there and buy it for what I need to? If the answer there is yes, then let's take care of everything else on the sales call. Because I'm not going to be able to sell them over the phone. I want to be face-to-face with them. Saul?
So you're asking for advance agreement that if it makes sense, we'll bring it up to your brother. So are you booking appointment from appointment, or are you leaving numbers on the table to bring that person to that brother those numbers. Does it make sense what I'm saying or no?
Yeah, I understand. So you're asking, do I leave the numbers?
Okay.
Right. Second, you give up all your numbers, you lose your leverage, right? So we know we don't want to do that. We've already discussed that. So there's two ways we can go. Is just say, too early to talk about numbers. Our next step would be to bring him in, unless after everything we talk about, you don't think it makes sense, right? You make the one sale first. Or you give him numbers, but it's got to be a wide enough range, right? So if, hey, I need to have some kind of idea of the numbers. Hey, perfect. But since we haven't talked to your brother yet, I'm not sure what he wants out of it, how we're going to have to structure the deal, so I'll give you a range. I don't know I don't know any of that stuff. I'm confident that we'd be between 80 and 120, right? And if you think that makes sense and you know, the rest of the stuff all makes sense and you feel good about it, our next step would be to talk to him so we could start bringing that number to a point, right? I want to keep my leverage. The last thing I'm going to do is just, the second I give up the number, I'm not talking to brother Joel. It's, oh, well, I got your number, I'll run and buy him and I'll tell you what he says. I mean, who's been in that situation, right? That it's common, it happens. This is how you get around it. The sale at that point with multiple decision makers does not come from you signing the contract, because we already know what are the chances of that person signing the contract with multiple decision makers. And what percentage do you guys see? 0, okay? So we know that doesn't work. So here's a strategy that does.
Is there ever a case where you would give your offer? Is there ever a case where you would give your offer? Let's say you're speaking to the wife and the husband's at work.
Yeah.
Without doing a bracket pricing. Is there ever a case where you give like an actual number so she could talk to her husband or whatnot?
There's always going to be some cloudiness around the number. Again, it's your last piece of leverage. You can give the number, you just know, unless they're in love with it and decide, yes, let's go with this, you're probably not going to hear back from them. You cut off communication at that point. So if you haven't talked to the husband and you feel you might, because that might be a heavy influencer on the decision, you're a lot less likely at this point because they have what they need from you. It's hard to call back and say, well, I know I told you what we do, and I know I gave you our number, but I'd love to come and sit down with you and your husband and work through this. If someone said that to you, what are you thinking? I'm about to be sold, pressured into something. I already have what I need from you. Not likely to happen. In my experience, at least. How about you guys? When you give them the number and everything, how often can you get back in and demand time? They got to be pretty close to a yes if that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, or you spend a lot of time doing, you know, like in Boss's stuff that you were mentioning earlier, if you spend a lot of time building rapport and empathy with that person, we've seen it both ways.
So a lot of empathy that increases your chances, absolutely.
It just depends on where kind of your strengths are, right? I haven't had John's 12-week course, but you know, we've concentrated around the office for the past year or so in, you know, negotiation and empathy, right? So we have a very strong base in that, and not as much on these type of sales techniques. So it's possible, but this honestly is a lot less work than building a bunch of rapport with a bunch of people.
You need it all, though. I mean, let's talk. We've probably covered 40 or 50 different things you could be doing, right, so far. It's not about, in order to get a sale, you got to do all 40 or 50. It's about you probably need to be pretty good at a handful of those. That's it. And if you're seeing that you're running into consistent issues and losing the same types of deals over and over, then you probably want to implement some of the stuff we talked about that directly addresses the reason why you're losing those deals. That's all it is. I'm not going to tell any of you, you've got to do all of this stuff to be successful in your industry. You got to be pretty decent in a handful of it. That's it. Does that make sense, everybody? I mean, I am probably really, really, really good at 2 or 3 of the tactics we talked about. And that's enough to get me by, right? I can pull some of them out, the others out when I need to, when a specific situation really calls for it, but that's it, right? What I want us to accomplish today is figure out where are my, or this week, where are my weak points and what tactics can I use to help shore up those gaps? And what 2 or 3 tactics or techniques am I just naturally suited for that I can frickin' become a rock star at, and that can impact sales. That's all we need to get out of this to really see an increase in conversion rates. Steve?
One thing you mentioned yesterday with the price range, or maybe it was this morning, I can't remember, but is that if you give a large enough range, right, and one that you know that their number is going to fall in between, and you get them committed to something within that range, I find that when it comes time to giving the offer, you're much more in line with one another. And
Yeah.
you know, it's something that you can even work with and play around with. You know, one thing that I've been doing based on your training, and it's just kind of evolved, is I'll give a price range. And you know, I had someone that was, you know, we were about 40K apart, and where we ended up landing was not in the middle, not splitting the difference, way closer to my number than theirs, but just the way that you work it back, starting from that bigger range and then working them down to a price that's closer to yours is, I mean, it's just becoming more and more part of what we do every single day,
Yeah.
even before the person goes on the appointment, because we want to make sure that our guys are going on appointments that are motivated sellers, right? And if they're not willing to get into that price range where we know that we need them, or at least close to, then we're just wasting our time. They're just looking for the highest bid.
Yeah.
And so you got to pre-qualify these guys too, and I think that the offer range is a good way to do that.
Perfect. Guys, deal killers, did we get what we needed out of that? We're going to talk about exactly what to ask, the words to use, but do you understand the concept of what we're trying to uncover when I talk about that step?
Yes.
Okay, let's eat, take 15 minutes, phone calls, emails, and then circle back.